So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah! What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, the Detroit Lions defense is not very good. They don't have a lot of pressure. They don't get a lot of sacks. They really aren't a great pass rush. And a lot of people are starting to blame a lot of different people. But there seems to be a growing sense around the Detroit Lions fans that maybe Aidan Hutchinson, the former second overall pick from the University of Michigan and the guy that was second last year in Defensive Rookie of the Year voting, isn't doing enough for this defense. There are games where it feels like Aidan Hutchinson is invisible. There are games where it feels like Aidan Hutchinson doesn't have the biggest impact on this defensive line. And when Aidan Hutchinson doesn't have a big impact, you know for a fact the rest of the defensive line is not going to pick up the slack. So I wanted to kind of explore this idea. I wanted to take a look at Aidan Hutchinson. I wanted to take a look at all the games that they've played this year, all the games that Aidan Hutchinson's been impactful, all the games that Aidan Hutchinson has felt invisible, and talk about whether or not Aidan Hutchinson really isn't doing enough for this Detroit Lions defense, or whether maybe, just maybe, the rest of the defense isn't quite carrying their weight, putting too much pressure on Aidan Hutchinson and forcing Aidan Hutchinson to essentially be a one-man wrecking crew with a team that does not support him. So, with that being said, let's take a look at Aidan Hutchinson's season so far. In year 2 through 11 games, Aidan Hutchinson has 34 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 15 quarterback hits, 5.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, 4 passes defended, and an interception. Aidan Hutchinson is not having a bad sophomore season per se, but he really isn't having a great sophomore season like a lot of people thought he potentially could. Now, some of that have to do with the fact that James Houston got hurt, taking a lot of pressure off of that side of the line and putting it all on Aidan Hutchinson. With Aidan Hutchinson being really the only true threat on the edge, teams can kind of tee off on him. They can game plan around him. They can double team him. They can triple team him. They can chip him. They can, block him with an extra tight end. They can bring in an extra blocker late to throw him out of the play. There's a lot of different ways that teams scheme around Aidan Hutchinson. And after James Houston went down with an unfortunate leg fracture, that's pretty much exactly what happened. Just for reference, last year through 11 games, Aidan Hutchinson also had 5.5 sacks, but he only had 6 quarterback hits. So Aidan Hutchinson is better. Aidan Hutchinson's actually having a better sophomore season than he had as a rookie, but it doesn't quite feel like that because there's been a long stretch of games over the last month and a half where Aidan Hutchinson has 1 sack across the last 6 games. Now, throughout the last 6 games, Aidan Hutchinson, as I said, has just 1 quarterback sack. He has 5 games and 4 straight games through the last month where he hasn't had a sack. Before Chicago, he went a month straight without sacking the quarterback, but that's not to say he wasn't an impactful player. There were a lot of games where Aidan Hutchinson was in the backfield. There's a lot of games where Aidan Hutchinson was directing the flow of play. There was a lot of games where Aidan Hutchinson made plays in the backfield that don't show up on the stat sheet. In particular, I look at the Chargers game and the Raiders game, right? Coming off the bye, Aidan Hutchinson had a game against the Raiders where, he didn't record a sack, but he had 3 different quarterback hits as well as a multitude of different pressures that affected the outcome of that game. And the big one, of course, being the missed 98-yard passing touchdown that if Aidan Hutchinson hadn't been in the face of Jimmy Garoppolo, hadn't recorded a QB hit on that play, that likely is a 98-yard receiving touchdown, flipping the game on its head and putting the Las Vegas Raiders right back in it on Monday Night Football. Another game right after, the Detroit Lions went to LA. They went to the Chargers, where Aidan Hutchinson again had multiple pressures and 2 different quarterback hits on Justin Herbert that affected the outcome of the game, where Justin Herbert threw an incomplete pass, threw it too low for Austin Eckler, or just in general forced the ball out when Aidan Hutchinson was in his face. So while Aidan Hutchinson didn't record a sack in those 2 games, he was arguably the best defensive player for the Detroit Lions in those games and single-handedly stopped multiple drives due to the pressures, pressures due to the QB hit and due to being very, very close to the quarterback, but unfortunately not quite being able to finish the game or finish the rep, as the QB just happened to get the football out really, really quickly. Now, Aidan Hutchinson also has a game-winning sack against the Chicago Bears where, yeah, he was pretty silent all game, but it was pretty evident the Chicago Bears planned around Aidan Hutchinson. And while Darnell Wright, I thought, did a really good job against Aidan Hutchinson, there were a couple reps where he had some help. There were some reps where Cole Kmet was doubling. There were some reps where Chicago just kind of sent a couple different guys at Aidan Hutchinson to slow him down. And although I think Darnell Wright, like I said, did have a really good game versus Aidan Hutchinson had several different pressures in that game. He had 2 quarterback hits in that game as well as I charted, I think, 5 or 6 pressures in that game from both the right and left side of the defensive line. And of course, made the big play at the end where he stripped Justin Fields and kicked the ball out of the back of the end zone, essentially for the game-sealing safety. So Aidan Hutchinson has been impactful. Aidan Hutchinson has been a player that is affecting the Detroit Lions defense. And quite honestly, without Aidan Hutchinson, I don't think this defense has really anything going for it on the defensive line because they just don't have anybody stepping up to rush the passer. Taking a look at the other help around Aidan Hutchinson, Aleem McNeil has actually been really, really good. He has 5 sacks from the interior defensive lineman. He's a guy that actually gets held a lot. He's a guy that actually gets double teamed quite a bit and does take that pressure off of Aidan Hutchinson. But the problem is when they have them on the field together, Aidan Hutchinson and Aleem McNeil typically rush next to each other, meaning they can just send the offensive line can just send 3 guys over there for a 3-on-2. And as soon as they contain one, they're going to send the right guard over to take on Aidan Hutchinson and take him out of the play. It is a vicious cycle for those guys. I went through and I watched every single rep that this defensive line has taken this year, and the amount of reps where they send 3 or 4 guys to the right side of the line, they send 3 offensive linemen and a blocking tight end or a chipping running back, and they essentially chip Aidan Hutchinson to slow him down, have him one-on-one with the tackle for a couple of seconds, and then as soon as the right guard and the center take care of Aleem McNeil from the double team, the right guard turns away and comes back and essentially blindside blocks Aidan Hutchinson to take him out of the play as well. And somehow, despite being the primary focus and really the sole focus of the offensive line, they both have 5 sacks each. So that opens up a lot of opportunities for guys like John Kaminsky, Charles Harris, Romeo Okwara to get the job done and to win their one-on-one matchups. So how have they done that? Well, John Kaminsky has 1 sack in 7 games, has 1 sack in 11 games. Charles Harris hasn't recorded a quarterback hit since week 4. And Romeo Okwara, through the last 6 games, has recorded just 1 quarterback pressure. Not a quarterback hit, not a sack, a single quarterback pressure where he impacted the play. That is not good. That is the help Aidan Hutchinson and Aleem McNeil are getting from the right side of the defensive line, from the rushing off the left tackle. It's not good. And the only player that really is playing well is Julian Okwara, who has 2 sacks in 76 reps. And yet somehow they decided that that guy, the only guy actually bringing a little bit of pass rush presence to the Detroit Lions defensive line outside of Hutchinson and Aleem McNeil, was going to be a healthy scratch on Thanksgiving and was going to receive 8 to 12 snaps in every other game that he has played. Taking a look at the rest of this defensive line, Aidan Hutchinson has 5.5 sacks. Aleem McNeil has 5 sacks. Alex Anzalone, your off-ball linebacker, has 3 sacks, being 3rd on the team in sacks on the quarterback. Julian Okwara, in 6 games in 78 snaps, has 2 sacks and yet won't be put on the field again. And then you go down to the rest of the defensive line where you have Charles Harris has a 1.5 sacks, John Kaminsky has a single sack, and Romeo Okwara has 0. Romeo Okwara actually only has, I believe, 5 pressures on the entire season through 11 games, despite playing a significant amount of snaps for this Detroit Lions defense. So you have Aidan Hutchinson, who's been great. You have Aleem McNeil, who I think is arguably our best player on the defense at this point. You have Alex Anzalone, a blitzing linebacker that gets home on free rushes. And then you have Julian Okwara, a player that, as I said, I will keep repeating this, 78 snaps, not all of which were pass rushing snaps, by the way. Some of them were run defense snaps, where he has 2 sacks and 78 defensive snaps. And again, how does Aaron Glenn reward that? How does Aaron Glenn take the really only other player to get any amount of pressure, any amount of affecting the quarterback on the defensive line? He says, hey, you know what? After your game, after your sack, I'm going to take you off the field. And the next game, I'm going to give you 12 snaps. And the game after that, I'm going to give you nothing because you're going to be a healthy scratch and you will not play. That is poor coaching. That is poor decision making. That is poor personnel decision. And that's not necessarily new for Aaron Glenn. But when you have zero pressures, when you have no help for Aidan Hutchinson and Aleem McNeil, and you're continuously letting the quarterback escape the pocket, you're making Jordan Love and Justin Fields look like Pro Bowl caliber quarterbacks. You should probably put guys on the field that can actually get to the quarterback. I don't necessarily want Charles Harris or John Kaminsky or Romeo Okwara to fail. I don't want them to, get cut or lose their jobs or anything. But if they're not getting to the quarterback, if they're not doing their job effectively, they shouldn't be on the field. You should put players on the field that are going to help Aidan Hutchinson, that are going to help this pass rush. And all of a sudden, right through the last month and a half, right through the last month, Romeo Okwara. And all of a sudden, through the last month, you have this young outside linebacker, a player that, yes, had some injury concerns early in the year, but has been healthy for the last 6 games. He has 2 sacks in less than 100 overall snaps. And then you say, okay, yeah, but that guy's not good enough. We're going to play the guy that has 1.5 sacks in 11 games or 1 sack in 11 games. And we're going to play a guy that has 1 pressure in the last 6 weeks over a guy that has 2 sacks over really less than 2 games worth of snaps. So for me, I think it's a combination of Aidan Hutchinson is being really good. Aidan Hutchinson has been super impactful for this defensive line. It just doesn't necessarily show up because when he gets to the quarterback, the ball is out very quick. Because when he gets in the face of the quarterback, it's a missed throw, but it doesn't quite feel like Aidan Hutchinson impacted the play enough because it could have been a safety, because it could have been a sack, it could have been lost yardage, and it turned into essentially a neutral play. It turned into a 0-yard gain, a 0-yard loss. And that doesn't feel like Aidan Hutchinson's impact is enough, but it really has been. Aidan Hutchinson has had a couple of games where he's been really quiet. I think the Baltimore game, he was relatively quiet, although he did have a couple of pressures in that game. The Tampa Bay game, he was really, really quiet for the most part of the Chicago game, and the Green Bay game, he was really quiet. But a lot of that is because he's being schemed around. It's because they're sending 2 offensive linemen and a tight end, 2 offensive linemen and a running back, an offensive lineman, a running back, and a tight end at Aidan Hutchinson, slowing him down. And really, Aidan Hutchinson is going through probably the worst stretch that you could imagine as a football player. He is not getting a lot of help. He is completely just having different guys thrown at him over and over and over, and somehow still walked away in 11 games with 5.5 sacks. But I don't think it's necessarily an issue of Aidan Hutchinson not being good enough. I think it's the help around him not helping him enough. And I think until his help arrives, until Aaron Glenn either decides to play the guys that are actually getting pressure or finds a way to scheme some extra pressure, they're not going to be a very good defense. And Aidan Hutchinson's impact is always going to feel slightly minimized. So with that being said, that is all for you guys today. That is my breakdown and analysis of Aidan Hutchinson, how he's been this season, and whether or not he's really doing enough for this Detroit Lions defense. Of course, the easy answer is yes. And I think that the tape and the stats would back that up. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have any comments, any thoughts below, please let me know down in the comments. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Thank you all so very much for watching. Until next time, and as always, go Lions.